Good morning. For those of you that don't know, my name is Jonathan Wisner. I'm 16 years old. I'm a junior at Linn-Mar High School. And besides Edge, I'm mainly involved in Key Club, which is a service organization, the Future Business Leaders of America, as well as my school's symphony orchestra. Up until freshman year, I was what I'd probably consider an upper middle class family. We had a nice house, a dog, my parents loved each other, and I went to a good school. However, all of that changed for me my freshman year during spring break. My mother, the nurse, had just left town to care for my grandmother after an arm surgery, so it was just my father, my sister, and I at home. On the night of the 15th, everything was just as normal. We went and ate dinner at Noodles & Company, shopped at Menards, and my sister went home and then went to a friend's house to spend the night. I went to bed as normal, saying night to my dad as I normally did, and he responded, "Night, bud." Those were the last words that I ever heard my father speak. I was awoken the next morning by my sister, who was crying hysterically over me, saying, "John, you have to help him. He's on the floor. John, you have to help him." I jumped out of my bed and rushed through the house to find him lying on the floor in the kitchen. I remember his face and his fingertips were blue, and he wasn't breathing. I told my sister to grab the phone and call 911, and my first instinct was to call my mother and ask for help. Since my phone was turned off in my room, I grabbed my dad's phone off the nightstand and called my mom. She told me to go get my neighbor, so I ran outside, through the snow, in my underwear, went and got them. When I came back, I began to perform CPR on my dad, and I would say that's probably the hardest thing that I've ever done. As the paramedics arrived, my sister pulled me aside into our guest bedroom to pray together. This is a moment that I don't think I'll ever forget. At this point in my life, my relationship with Jesus was not deep. I knew of him and I believed in him, but I really wasn't living for him or taking him all that seriously. My fire was fighting to stay alive. When Maddie began to pray, she said, "God, and we know that if you take him today, that if this is his time, that that's okay, and that we can get through that because it's all part of your plan for us." I was taken aback. Never once in my mind had I considered that this was going to end badly. I had been under the assumption that God wouldn't take him yet, that something like this couldn't or wouldn't happen to me. I was fascinated by her ability to not only accept that, but to tell God that it was okay and that we could do it through him. I was inspired to reach for the place that could let me do that too. As I transported my dad to the hospital, I rode along with my neighbor. My sister and I were alone in the biggest mess of our lives as my mother drove home from Knoxville, which was about 2 hours away. While waiting at the hospital, I called Katie Castle, the youth director here at LCR, and she was already on her way to the hospital. After what seemed like forever waiting in a small room with a social worker, the doctor came in and spoke the words that I had so dreaded. My father was dead. I remember it being just like a wave that came over me all at once. A wave of sadness, a wave of anger, but mostly a wave of brokenness. I remember Katie walking into the ER and I just sprinted into her arms. The rest of that day is pretty much a blur. After that week, I went back to what you would say is, quote, normal life. I started going back to school, went back to Edge, but I still wasn't ready to talk about what had happened to me. And I really didn't want to, so I began to use Christian music, much like the songs that we sing every week at Edge, to get through things. The music, the lyrics, they spoke to my soul. They were my way of feeling things, the things that I didn't want to talk to people about, the things that I kept inside. The songs, they went from being just lyrics to being my prayers to God. I could sing, and in that moment, God and I were so close, I could feel his hand on my shoulder. I could feel him comforting me. I was allowing him in to let him change me, to change my heart. This was my coping mechanism. I had nowhere else to turn, nowhere else to run. What else could I do but give it to God? It's been almost 2 years now since my father has passed, and my spiritual relationship has completely changed. I've been able to use this experience to grow in my faith and hear God's voice calling me. I had to reach a low that I had never imagined so God could bring me up from that low into his glory. No, not everyone has an experience like this. By no means is that necessary. That was just my own personal experience. I would say that one of the biggest things that God has taught me throughout this whole mess is that there is nothing that will ever bring you true peace but God. If you keep things to yourself and you don't give them up to God, there will be no relief. There are many outlets that you can try and use to mute the pain, but But I'm here to tell you that if you give it to God, he'll take it. He'll take it away from you, and all of the pain and the brokenness that you feel will be gone. I know that the pain and the brokenness that you feel will be overcome because of the pain and the suffering that Jesus felt upon that cross. I think when trouble strikes and when doubt and pain set into our hearts, we must trust in God. A song I recently enjoyed called Defender by King's Kaleidoscope says, "Who is our rock but our God?" And that statement, I think, carries so much truth. Now, I'm not up here saying that it doesn't still hurt or that I have everything put together, because I don't. But I can attest to the strides that I've made when I rely on myself, when I rely on God, rather, and not on myself to cleanse me and bring me peace. Even when it hurts, even when the fight seems lost, I will praise the name of God and his Son, because I know that God is greater than my struggles, and I know that one day Jesus will return, and all the pain and the hurt and the brokenness that I feel will be gone. Before I go, I'd like to leave you with a verse. John 16:33 says, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." Thank you.